Hello, I'm very, very, very excited today to be talking to Juliet Gellatley, founder and director of Viva. Hello, Juliet.
Hi, Wendy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well. Very busy.
I imagine you are. I mean, I don't know really quite where to begin to talk to you because there's so many things I'd love to talk to you about, but we've half an hour. So, let's kick in with Hogwood, the long-awaited, wonderful documentary you've just made. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, well, Hogwood was a mammoth task, obviously, which is just being released on Amazon, Google, and Apple. And it was a long time in the making because we first investigated Hogwood back in 2017, and we'd had complaints from locals about it, and our investigator went in to check it out, and it was what he brought back was so horrific. I thought I will go here myself, film to camera, and sort of blow the conditions wide open, as it were, and surely to goodness, because it was so bad. I mean, I've been filming, remember, by this point for a very long time, many years, and I was actually genuinely very confident that Tesco, who they supplied, would drop them straight away. They were Red Tractor approved, and in fact what we found was that everybody dug their heels in and just said, well, oh, we'll help the farm improve. And they upped their security. They spent £50,000 on more security. It became like Fort Knox, so it became a very difficult place to investigate. But we went back in 2018 and found very similar conditions. So, you know, in a very, very quick nutshell, the overcrowding was, when I went in, was so severe. One of the things that really struck me was that these very young animals, I say one of the first sheds I went in, they were about 3 months old, was that they could never sleep because it was so overcrowded. If one pig moved, they would, knock the pig that was next to them or stand on them. And I just thought, this is a form of torture for us. And these poor animals, it was something that just really struck me. And all these bright eyes looking at you, and they're all like hoping for, something to happen, something to do, because they're so utterly bored. You have to remember, pigs are one of the most intelligent species on our planet. And to confine these animals like this in these factory farms is just horrendous. Even if you aren't outright cruel to them in the sense of hitting them, everything is denied of them, the utter neglect. And what we found on Hogwood was that it was neglect. So it was animals that had ulcerations that had gone through to the bone. So it's animals in severe pain that had just been abandoned. There's animals that have been abandoned in gangways with, no food, no straw. You're supposed to put them in isolation pens. And every recommendation by the government was just ignored, really. And so it was particularly shocking. And we found a pig that was abandoned in the same gangway with a lot of other ill pigs and was literally being cannibalized alive. And this animal was so dejected, she couldn't even move, and her leg was just being eaten at by these other pigs that were utterly dejected. And so we stopped the investigation and called the police, and we called the RSPCA, we called vets, and of course nothing happened. And that's part of the story of Hogwood, is because the British public, when we've shown them the conditions in that place, remember this was a big player, it's a so-called mega farm supplying the biggest retailer in the UK. The British public are so shocked. They said, this can't be Britain. Surely this has to be illegal. Surely if you just report the place, it will be shut down. And so that's one of the reasons we made the documentary, was to make people understand that in this day and age, in this so-called civilized society, this is perfectly accepted by the authorities. So it was, we called in trading standards, we called in the government's departments, we called in vets, we called in the RSPCA vet, we called in Red Tractor, who approved them, and we contacted Tesco time and time again. They all, they dug their heels in. The RSPCA did criticise it and said they were concerned about the low welfare standards, but because the law is so minimal, there was nothing that they could do. So we had this major campaign with people across the UK getting more and more, upset and annoyed by the fact that Tesco continued to stop the meat from this place and not speak out against it. And we had demos on the same day, we call them days of action, where people just literally talk to people, the customers of the store as they're going in, and talk to the local store managers, who are often very sympathetic, I have to say. and just to make people more aware, and the campaign built momentum. And so I thought, I just can't give up on this. And we went back in yet again in 2019, and this time left hidden cameras. It was very difficult getting back in because they'd upped the security so much. But we did it. And the hidden cameras got the actual men working on the farm hitting the animals. And that was the final thing that made Tesco change, because they just couldn't justify it from a public relations point of view. And Cranswick Food, who Hogwood supplied Cranswick and Cranswick supplied Tesco, and Cranswick said these conditions are unjustifiable, we will never deal with Hogwood again. So Tesco issued a statement saying that pretty much the same thing, and of course Red Tractor at that point suspended them. The National Pig Association had defended the farm all the way along and suddenly stopped. And so the story of Hogwood, the documentary, is that story, but it's a lot wider than that. We look at why pandemics happen, why antibiotic resistance is happening, why factory farming is destroying our planet, and why it simply has to end. So it's very, very topical, and it is building momentum. I was really glad, as you know, that it's being picked to go forward for the British Documentary Festival. So we'll see if it gets anywhere with that. But word of mouth really is what we need. As with any documentary, and as you very well know, with documentaries, it can take a considerable length of time for word of mouth, to build up, as you remember with Earthlings. I can remember actually doing a showing of that years before it actually became popular in Bristol in a cinema.
Wow.
And it took about another 5 years before people were really talking about Earthlings. I hope Hogwood doesn't take as long as that, but we desperately need things to change, and for governments across the world, not just the British one, but for all of them to stop, cowtailing to these factory farmers. This has to end. It has to be illegal, and soon.
And you're doing the wonderful job of making people aware. I wonder that maybe people aren't aware. They can't be, can they? Because as you found, the public said no, once they saw what was going on.
That's the thing, you sometimes wonder about living in a democracy, because every time a survey is done on factory farming, the vast majority of the public want factory farming to end. I mean, you can say, of course, they have the choice, and they do. The truth is, every time you go into a supermarket, you have the choice in terms of what you spend your money on. You don't have to buy meat at all, of course. But the vast majority of people really are shocked by what we show them. They haven't got a clue. I had so many people come back with Hogwood, watched it, who just can't believe that this is the UK. People, it's the typical reaction, isn't it? It all happens somewhere else and everything's fine here. And they also trust British supermarkets to maintain a certain standard. And that's something that we're trying to erode, this veneer that British supermarkets somehow care. Because they don't, they just want to sell the product. And what I was told behind the scenes, because I was often asked, well, why don't Tesco just drop them? And what apparently somebody high up in Tesco told somebody who's related to Tesco, who I can't name, but it doesn't matter. Behind the scenes, what they said was, well, if we drop Hogwood, the farm that will replace it will be just as bad. And Viva will come along and expose that. So where are we left? Either the whole system changes or we stand up to Viva. Which is very telling in its own right, isn't it? Because they're just admitting that it's all a pile of cruel neglect, and where animals are treated as commodities in the worst possible sense, which is not what the British public, even the meat-eating public, they like to think the animals are kept well. Obviously, we've got our own views on that, Wendy, but you know what I mean. Yeah. And certainly they don't meet. These factory farms don't meet even the most basic of standards that are supplying supermarkets.